Hello and welcome to the EDHRECast, where we're all about Commander, data, and dad jokes. I'm Joey Schultz, and I'm joined by my fantastic co-host. There are so many preview seasons and releases happening all at the same time right now that they have all formed a single set in his mind, and that set is called The Edge of Sonic the Last Spider-Man Bender. It's Dana Roach. Hey, Dana.
I had a doctor's appointment the other day, and he told me two very important things. First, excessive alcohol consumption can cause memory loss. And the second one...
Let me guess. The second one, you don't remember.
Yeah. I mean, I don't... I'm sure it was fine. I'm sure it wasn't important.
Yeah, it'll come back to you. You're a very old-fashioned type of guy that way.
Right, yeah.
All right, Dana, it's you and I on this show. What are we talking about in this episode?
How to break the color pie in Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, let's go over those really interesting restrictions on each color, because it turns out those restrictions get broken a lot. That actually happens pretty frequently, and some of the cards in the Commander format that have broken that color pie are really, really popular and also really powerful. So we kind of want to go over a whole bunch of those to see what it is that makes them so special and so, frankly, amazing during games of EDH.
Yeah, so let's kind of jump into this and talk about... Actually, one of my favorite ones to talk about here is Harmonize.
Yeah, I thought you'd start with green. Heck yeah.
And Harmonize is super simple. You know, it's a double green, 2 colorless, so 4 mana total, sorcery speed, draw 3 cards. Like, there's nothing remotely exciting or interesting about that. And it's not like green doesn't have ways to draw cards. There's a ton of ways to draw cards in green. And not just draw cards, like draw a bunch of cards.
A butt ton, if you will.
Yes. I mean, Rich Card's Expertise is kind of like the one we love to talk about. It's, I think, one of Matt's favorite cards of all time. Mm-hmm. Draw a pile of cards, play a thing for free. It's absurd. And there's like a bunch of ways to do things. Like there's cards that draw you a card for every creature you control. Or there's ones that draw you a card whenever a creature comes into play. Like green has a lot of draw options. What green doesn't have is a spell that draws you 3 cards every time, regardless of what's happening. It doesn't care. It doesn't care if you've drawn no creatures and had none in play. It doesn't care if someone just wiped the board. It doesn't care. It draws you 3 cards. And I wouldn't want 4 of these effects in green or 5 of these effects. Mm-hmm. But I really like one of those effects. If I'm playing in like mono green or Selesny and I have nothing else that does that.
Right.
That's really, really useful.
It is so useful. The fact that so many of the other aspects of green as a color rely upon the presence of creatures in play or you casting creatures to get that card advantage continuing on. There's supposed to be a little bit of I have to put my neck out there a little bit and risk these things potentially being destroyed in order for me to get the rewards here. And that extends to things like green's removal and such like that. But with the card draw especially, that's one of the things that makes Harmonize so good. And you're not the only one who enjoys it. It's showing up in 8% of decks that can play it out there. In over 250,000 decks it's showing up in. Yep. And that's actually not the only green card draw piece that has a decent amount of popularity, because it is a form of card draw that uniquely within green doesn't care about the presence of creatures. Another famous one being here, Sylvan Library, which shows up in 9% of decks and shows up in over 300,000 decks out there, which can let you choose some extra cards and even, here's a weird thing, pay life to keep extra cards. Like one of the breakiest color breaks to ever exist, but powerful because it is such an exception to the usual cadence of green.
Yeah, in the worst case scenario there is like you still get to choose the best of 3, which is very, very useful. Green is a color, filled with like library search effects, so it's very easy to reset those top 3 cards. But yeah, like you said, like the power of this is it just lets you draw cards and it doesn't care about any other board conditions. You just get to put cards into your hand regardless of what your current board state looks like. And like that is super powerful to the point where Sylvan Library, like Harmonize, there's definitely color combinations. I feel like I can do things in the other color that I don't need to harmonize. Sylvan Library, like, it doesn't matter what you're running. That's a card worth considering in a even 5-color deck. It's that powerful.
Sylvan Library should be a black card. Just truly, that
absolutely.
card is like so not coded to the color green at all. But
yes,
but you know, the uniqueness here is really what is so important, and I think that's why we see such big numbers for moments where the color pie does actually step a little bit outside of the bounds here. And again, because of the unique nature of color pie breaks, when those colors do step outside of bounds a little bit, and suddenly you have access to something that maybe that color wasn't supposed to, that can lead to huge numbers for those cards. One of the most popular cards in the entire format is definitely a color pie break, and that's Beast Within. The 3-mana instant destroy target permanent its controller makes a 3/3 green beast creature token, showing up in over 1 million decks in Commander, and in about 36-ish% of decks that are eligible to play it. Green is not supposed to be able to kill off other creatures without needing to usually fight those creatures or engage them in combat in some way. That is supposed to be Green's whole deal. But Beast Within is one of the breakiest breaks and also one of the top 7 most popular cards in the entire format as a result of how good that effect is when you give it to a color that is probably not supposed to have it in that form.
Yeah, like, it's just a pure removal spell. Any target gets destroyed, and okay, they get a 3/3 green beast, but like, that's almost always worth it to have the utility of instant speed destroying anything. Like, any card that's the problem, you can take it out with Beast Within in a color that isn't supposed to necessarily be able to do that. Fantastic.
And look at the other version of it, which is in white, which is, I think, a more correct color for this effect, the card Generous Gift, which is actually showing up in 23% of decks that can play it.
Yeah.
But white is getting a whole bunch of different versions of this type of effect, from Stroke of Midnight to Excise the Imperfect to whatever the new one from Edge of Eternity is that gives them a lander token. Like, white is regularly exploring that area, and so it's getting a little bit more competition amongst each of those, whereas Beast Within is kind of like, yeah, I'm not going to get other brothers and sisters in my color, nor should it.
You know, absolutely not. Well, and for idea of like how good Beast Within is, Desert Twister, that's also a destroy target permanent effect at sorcery speed for 6 mana, still sees a little bit of play. It's in like 2,000 some decks in EDHREC. Like, the so much worse version of it still gets played a little bit because, like, in mono green, the ability to destroy something with no restrictions on yourself is very, very useful.
Yeah. Honestly, green is easily the biggest part of our list here when it comes to like breaking the color pie. Green is the biggest sinner in this regard. It just truly is. Explorations that are pushing that envelope a little bit have been felt, I think, the hardest in green. Like, green has flying now. They fly now, apparently. Like, green has Hornet Queen, which is a great card and very, very thematic. But green was probably not supposed to be able to make that many flying creatures. And Mark Rosewater has famously said that, like, hey, yeah, no, that's a break. But also now in current design, we get green dragons pretty regularly, and like Old Gnawbone, everyone was just like, why isn't this green and red? Why is this just mono green? There's a whole bunch of these things now. So like, even things that green was regularly not supposed to have access to, it has been getting more and more regular access to as those envelopes have continued to be pushed over the years. Yeah.
I mean, it's always, we've always kind of joked about green being design's favorite color. But it does feel that way a little bit with all of these breaks we've gotten over the years. And a lot of the breaks we're going to talk about here tend to be from older cards, you know, back when the color pie was much more nebulous in terms of how strict it was. You know, Planar Chaos, Time Spiral, Future Sight, that whole block has a lot of intentional color pie breaks. So like, you see that there as well. But green, some of these are relatively new. A couple of the enchantment removal effects green has. Lignify, Song of the Dryads, Kenneth's Transformation especially.
Once again, green being able to deal with a problem creature on the other side of the board without having to resort to using its own creatures in order to do that, which is very customary for that color. And yeah, those cards are good. We regularly enjoy casting a Lignify. We regularly enjoy casting a Song of the Dryads to take something down. Those cards are really, really solid.
You even get to like some kind of obscure weird ones too. I don't run Seed Time in any of my decks.
Is that the extra turn spell?
But I want to find a way to do it. Yeah, it's 1 in a green, an instant. You can only play it on your turn. Take an extra turn after this one if an opponent played a blue spell this turn.
Right. Yeah.
I believe the genesis of this back in the day was Factor Fiction decks were like such a terror in Standard. This was a Green's response to be able to deal with Factor Fiction. But like, how often do you know, in EDH, you see blue spells, counter spells obviously, but like end of turn Brainstorm, end of turn Factor Fiction, whatever, like that happens a lot. It's an extra turn in Green is crazy.
It truly can be. But it is interesting to see a color hate on another color by using the tools of that other color.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting pattern of design here. Speaking of old cards, we've got one other one here to shout out, and that's Concordant Crossroads, which is the 1 mana green enchantment giving all creatures haste. Very chaotic card, but like obviously, given modern design, much more of a thing in Red's wheelhouse than it is supposed to be in Green. But it's such an old card back when the color pie was perhaps a little bit more amorphous. And now for the decks that use it in Commander, Concordant Crossroads is something that you and I both use in our mono green decks pretty regularly to surprise the table with a whole bunch more damage than they were ready for.
Yeah, like being able to just for 1 mana give your entire field green give your entire field haste is really, really powerful. Like you said, there is a red version of this, but it came out after Concordant Crossroads.
Right. When they were like, oops.
Yeah, right. This was the original effect that did this. Very, very powerful and something that you just can't replicate with anything else, particularly in mono green.
Right. And the uniqueness there is something that we really want to key into this episode. I mean, that's why Concordant Crossroads is like a $20 card or something right now.
Yeah.
Because it can just be that good in those decks. When you give a mouse a cookie here, when you give a color something that they were probably not supposed to have, turns out that they can run really, really far with it. And in the case of Concordant Crossroads, run really, really fast with it too, because they all have haste. Yeah, there's a whole bunch in green especially. We've got a bunch of other colors to get to. Dana, before we get to those other colors, let's quickly do some shout outs.
We are excited to be teamed up with Dragon Shield. I just got in a box of their new non-glare sleeves and put them on my newest deck, and they work amazing at dealing with those harsh overhead lights you see in basically every game shop you've ever played in. They make your cards really tough to read, and the non-glare sleeves do a great job of letting you read them, making them easy for everyone at the table to see. Click the link in the description below. You get 5% off any Dragon Shield product. Promo code EDHREC in all lowercase. And make sure purchase cheaper and it supports the show. Protect your deck like a dragon.
This show is also brought to you by our fantastic patrons over at patreon.com/EDHRECast. The show cannot happen without you. And to show our thanks, we have great perks over there on Patreon, including access to our Discord, where you can chat with us, maybe find a game with other players, or you get access to the Challenge the Stats spreadsheet that shows all of our Challenge the Stats over the past years. If it makes sense for you to throw us $1, we appreciate it so dang much. And if you want to support us in totally free ways too, you can also do that by liking, subscribing, sharing the show with your friends, leaving us a review. But also, one final thing, in every episode we like to shout out one of our brilliant patrons. So this week we're going to heap some praise on Jack Bolson. Jack, thank you for being a patron. You help make this show possible.
And hey, I'm going to put an addendum onto this about supporting us on Patreon. We've been putting deck tech videos up every week.
Yeah.
I just released a 40-minute deck tech talking about my Dromoka the Eternal deck. Every week we do something talking about like a budget list or, something fun we saw or one of our own decks. For $2 a month, you can sub at a level where you can like join our Discord and you can watch an additional video every single week from us. That's $24 a year. Like that's what a pizza delivery costs for the content you get from us for joining our Discord. Absolutely worth it. It's worth your $2 a month.
Heck yeah. And you build really cool, hipstery, tricky decks. So it's nice to see a lot more of the thought process behind that. I feel like I learn stuff when I watch your videos, Dana. So
well, thank you very much.
Yeah, big recommendation on that. Let's get back into our talking here about breaking the color pie. Because again, color pie breaks can be really, really popular because of how much they assist that color when you give them something that they maybe weren't supposed to have. I think probably nothing better exemplifies that than the card Chaos Warp in the color red. Like as we move to red stuff here, Chaos Warp, famous card, and there's a lot of flavor that's going into here. The chaotic nature of Chaos Warp and who knows what they're going to flip when you remove something is really, really fun. There's a reason that this card shows up in 1 million decks, and in 30% of decks that can play it is because red's not supposed to be able to get rid of enchantments this easily, but Chaos Warp is one of the few ways to do it, and it's hilarious to play every time that you do.
Yeah, red primarily can remove creatures, almost always through damage, and it can destroy artifacts. this, like similarly to Beast Within in green, this just solves a problem and it doesn't care about anything else. And because of the way it works too, it like deals with indestructible as well. Like because of the way the effect is written, it will solve almost any problem at all. And yes, they reveal the top card of their library, but like, okay, 1/3 of the time, if not more, that's going to be a land. So you're just trading a scary thing for a land.
Right.
It's going to be an instant or sorcery pretty often. That's also not going to do them any good. So 2/3 of the time, they're going to get a land or nothing from it. And let's say they get a good permanent. Who cares? You've solved a problem, right? That's next turn's issue. You've dealt with this turn's issue. Because I've heard people complain about Chaos Warp. Oh, I always hit something really powerful. Oh, it's so not. Well, you're bad at using Chaos Warp then. If you're like, if you're revealing a bigger problem, Chaos Warp isn't to deal with some 2/2 bear coming at you that you don't want to take 2 damage from. You're stopping a Blightsteel that someone has swung at you, or you're getting rid of a doubling season when there's 8 tokens on the stack or something. Like any card that gets flipped off a Chaos Warp should be less of a threat than the thing you stopped from happening. And if it isn't, you're using Chaos Warp poorly.
I love this. It's almost like when someone uses a Path to Exile on their own thing to ramp a little bit. I'm like, I love seeing you use a Path to Exile on your own stuff. That's great for me as your opponent. If you're using a Chaos Warp on not my doubling season level threat, that's great. I might flip into something. I am more devastated when you hit something that like I really needed that turn. And even if I get a brand new threat, you still dealt with my plan that I have been like building so much momentum towards. So you really do scupper me, even if I get something new that's fun. Yeah, Chaotic Nature, a fantastic card. People don't need us to tell them that Chaos Warp is great, but the uniqueness here is really the thing to key in on, because the only other way that I personally can think off the top of my head for red to destroy enchantments with any level of regularity is to use like the liquimetal effects, liquimetal torque and liquimetal coating, to turn an enchantment into a piece of metal so that then they can use a artifact destruction effect on it to get rid of them, which is a trick that green can also do to destroy creatures and stuff like that. You know, turn a creature into a piece of metal and then cast a Rec Sage, something like that. A really, really fun trick, but it involves a lot of extra steps. Having just one card that is self-contained, I can deal with something that my color's not supposed to be able to deal with. Huge.
Yeah. Yeah, like just the wild card nature of it, well, I guess both in terms of the fact that it could reveal anything, but like that it will solve any problem is just, unbelievably powerful and useful, to the point where, like we kind of mentioned with Sylvan Library, Chaos Warp is good even if you have access to plenty of other colors that also do that.
Yes.
Like it's that good of a removal option.
Yes, yeah. Were they to make more things like that, it would be kind of like a, please don't. Whoa.
Yeah.
I feel like red is one of the colors that really benefits the most from its color pie bends and breaks.
Yes.
Like, were red to get access to more defensive magic, for instance, I think that could really spell doom for a lot of other players out there. I mean, Tybalt's Trickery is a fantastic freaking card when you are playing a red deck, because it is a red counterspell. And again, you know, the random element of Tybalt's Trickery flipping them into a new spell, might you get something that's kind of a problem that they flip into? Certainly a possibility, but that's usually better than letting them, I don't know, wrath your board or something, right? So it helps secure your position in a way that red is not usually supposed to be able to do. Red is not a defensive protect myself color. Red is a just go for it color. So to have access to a Tybalt's Trickery, oh, goodness gracious. If red were to get even more protective magic like that, I think the rest of the format would really start to feel it very quickly.
Well, I mean, talking protective magic, Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
like there's a reason they're as much staples in red in CEDH as the best counter spells are in blue, because they are a counter-target counterspell. If not, you know, obviously you can use them to destroy a blue permanent as well, but like having the ability for a single mana to counter any counter spell, particularly in the high powerful end of the format, is so valuable. But like, it's valuable anywhere. I know you run these cards, Joey, in Boros and red decks. Like, it's such a color pride break for red to be able to stand toe to toe with blue mages for solving problems on the stack.
1 mana kill your Atraxa feels so good. 1 mana stop your Psych Rift feels amazing. And to really hammer home, again, how these breaks can be so dang popular and powerful, Tybalt's Trickery is showing up in 160,000 decks out there, basically 5% of decks that are eligible to play it. And the other two, Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast, are showing up in about 200,000 decks each, about 6% of decks that are each eligible to play them. That's a lot. That really is a lot. That's many hundreds of thousands of decks. And folks, I think you're 100% right to play them. They're fantastic in those decks.
Yeah, there's just always going to be some sort of target. And okay, occasionally you'll be in a pot of no blue, I guess. That can be a thing that happens.
Oh no, if only I was playing a color that had rummage effects where I could discard a card I'm not using and draw something. Oh wait, I'm in red. Yeah.
And hey, if you're in a pot of no blue, that's kind of a good thing too, right? You're like,
honestly, yeah, that's the real win.
Right. So either way, you're just fine.
Yeah, I feel like red, it's important to wrap up with one other example here. Protective Magic in general is just so not red's vibe.
Yeah.
But Dana, you have a card that you've used super defensively in some of your red decks before, and it's been really annoying every single time. So let's talk about Glacial Crevices, man.
I love Glacial Crevices because, again, it's like such a dumb card to see in red. Mm-hmm. It's an enchantment, and you can sacrifice a snowland and fog.
It's so nutty.
So the only thing you have to do is put snow basics into your deck instead of the regular basics, and you have the ability to fog people as long as you have a land to sacrifice.
Yeah.
Amazing in an aggro, aggressive, damage-dealing color when you only need to buy yourself one turn really often.
This is kind of a reach for me to say this, but it is a rough equivalent in my head. Like, it's existing in the same space as White's Righteous Aura enchantment, where you can pay 2 life to negate damage from a creature. The repeatable nature of this thing is so frustrating. For folks who've been stuck up against someone recurring a Spore Frog over and over again, that's how Glacial Crevices feels.
Sure.
And that's already frustrating, but it's even more frustrating when your opponent's in red and doing that to you. You're like, you're supposed to be the aggro color. Why can't I hit you? You're supposed to be at least a little bit vulnerable to my damage on the crackback attack, and yet you're not because of the crevices. It's crazy good.
And you don't even need to necessarily have like access to a Crucible of Worlds or something to like bring those lands back. Just the ability to do it for 1 or 2 turns and get those fog effects off for the crackback, particularly in red, is enough. Like, you don't even need to have any extra gas. You just put in some snow basics and the card is good enough in a lot of situations.
It's kind of got that threat of activation situation going on for it too, where folks don't even want to like bother. It almost is serving a little bit like the way that a Ghostly Prison can sometimes just like be a casual deterrent for enough turns. That can sometimes buy you exactly the time that you need for red to do the things that red needs to do to win a game. So deeply frustrating card, honestly, Dana. But I love that you find these great gems. This is one that is not particularly popular, but it probably could stand to see a little bit more play. Early challenge to stats, dare I say?
Yeah, for sure. Especially in a color where like you tend to want to swing out and be very aggressive and not leave stuff back for blocking, for sure.
Yeah. I got to say, the under 2,000 decks that it's currently showing up in, we could budge those numbers up just a little bit. The main cost is that you play some snowlands. Yeah, you were probably doing that anyway because they're fun. Really, really great stuff here. I'll submit this as an early challenge to stats, I think, Dana. But also, let's get to the real challenge to stats before we get to the rest of the colors in the color pie. There's a whole bunch of other data that we got to talk about because we don't always agree with it. Some of these cards are overplayed. Some of these cards are underplayed. So let's challenge even more stats for real this time. This episode is brought to you by Archidekt, the very best Commander deck building website. We house all of our decks on Archidekt, which you can find linked in all of our episodes, or go to archidekt.com/EDHRECast. And by now, you've probably heard of my favorite feature on Archidekt, dragging and dropping directly from Scryfall or EDHREC right into your deck list, saving you tons of time on typing out your card choices when you're updating your list. And you probably also know that Archidekt's playtester is the very best in the biz, smoothly starting each new turn with a swift draw and untap, easily grouping and tapping things en masse if you need it, making searches and scries super simple, proliferating a bunch of counters with just one click of a button, and more. But did you also know about its playtester logs feature? Archidekt can track stats during your playtests, noting such data as your number of cards drawn each turn or number of mana producers played each turn, so you can see how often you're hitting your land drops or how many extra cards that you draw, and on what turns you're most likely to start drawing extra cards. I just playtested a +1 counters deck to see how much total power it could accrue on the field, and Architect tracked for me that I got up to 48 power by turn 6. Such easy access to a detailed recap of your playtests can help you get in tune with how your deck really works, or help you locate its weak spots, and all those little edges and extra bits of knowledge could make all the difference to make you more successful at your next game night. Check out our decks at architect.com/EDHRECast, that's ARCHIDEKT.com/EDHRECast, and thanks again to Architect for constantly innovating and for sponsoring the show.
My challenge this week is from patron supporter Corey, and it's for the new Shadow of the Hedgehog. Shadow's only actually been out in players' hands for a couple weeks now, but the card was previewed a long time ago, and there's just under 4,000 decks out there. So there's quite a few lists already up. And the challenge Corey presented here is for the card Tombstone Stairwell.
My boy!
Yeah, one of Joey's favorite cards. And this was a challenge of stats from you 6 or 7 years ago, I think, just in general.
Super early one, yeah.
And since then, it's gotten to be relatively expensive, so that's worth noting here too. It's like a $40 or $50 card now, I think, and I believe it's on the reserve list. Mm-hmm. So like, there's multiple reasons between Shadow being new and it being an expensive card for there to be not a lot of these currently in decks. There's only 26 in the almost 4,000 Shadow decks. But it is a really cute bit of interaction because of how Tombstone Stairwell works and how Shadow the Hedgehog works. One of Shadow's abilities is whenever a creature you control with flash or haste dies, draw a card. And Tombstone Stairwell, it has a cumulative upkeep, and at the beginning of each upkeep, each player creates a 2/2 black zombie creature token with haste for each creature card in their graveyard. And at the beginning of each end step, when this enchantment leaves the battlefield, destroy all tokens created with this enchantment. So you're making a bunch of tokens with Tombstone Stairwell. They are either dying on attack or being sacrificed, and because they have haste, you draw a card off Shadow. So it's just like a combination of an attack engine creating you tokens, and each of those tokens is going to draw you a card. It's just such a good combination that I couldn't resist citing Corey's suggestion here, even though it's a pricey card and Shadow's relatively new.
Yeah, both pricey, but if folks are comfortable proxying and stuff like that, certainly a way to try this out. If anything, I would almost warn, watch out, you might deck yourself because that's a lot of death triggers.
Absolutely, yes, for sure.
But yeah, card is definitely cracked. I'll move to my challenge here, and I want to talk about a card that is being cut from a lot of precons, and this is as good an excuse as any to talk about EDHREC's new precon page. We've had an update to that. It's really, really great to look over those precon pages now. They are very clean, showing you the whole deck list, and also, of course, showing you the cards that are most commonly added to those precons and most commonly cut from those precons. And here I'm going to talk about Titus, Yuna's Guardian, I'm going to talk about the Yuna's Guardian precon blitz deck. It is the Band Commander 3/3 human warrior that can put counters around on stuff and proliferate those counters as well whenever you hit someone with a creature that has a counter on it. The most popular card that is getting cut from the Titus precon is the card Generous Patron, a 3-mana 1/4 elf advisor. When it enters the battlefield, you support 2, which means you can put a +1 counter on each of up to 2 other target creatures. Note that doesn't need to be just your own creatures. And Generous Patron says whenever you put 1 or more counters on a creature that you don't control, you draw a card. So you can use the support 2 trigger to buff up your own stuff to enable Titus, or you can put them onto someone else's creature so that then you have something to proliferate and then start drawing even more cards. This is getting cut from 72% of the precon decks, according to the data that we're seeing here on this precons page. And I truly think that this needs to not happen. I think Generous Patron, every time that I have played the Titus deck, Generous Patron has drawn me minimum 10 cards because I am able to put a counter here or there on other people's stuff, but also there are just a lot of other types of counters out there that my commander can casually proliferate, and that draws so many freaking cards that I kind of don't care if your creature gets an extra +1/+1. I just drew like 7 cards off of a single proliferate trigger from my commander and Generous Patron. For just 3 mana, this thing is a huge source of card advantage, so I would really reconsider whether this is the first thing that you want to cut out of those decks. I actually think it's kind of a monster in that deck. It's really impressive every time that I've seen it, even in just the base precon. So reconsider Generous Patron. I think that it's actually fantastic there.
I don't like Generous Patron, but in this particular deck, in this situation, having played against, I think, the deck in Vegas, Joey, did you have the precon?
That's right. We did play that. Yeah.
And it drew you 25 cards, like a ridiculous amount of cards.
I was being conservative with my estimate that it drew me 10 cards per game.
Oh, yeah.
I think it has minimum drawn me 10 cards per game, but I remember in the game that we played, yeah, it was, my deck is emptying so dang quickly because of what this thing can do. It's very powerful when you are proliferating this regularly.
Yeah. It's like somebody wanted to create a commander that worked perfectly with Generous Patron.
Yeah, a fantastic card in that deck. So reconsider that one very strongly, folks. I think it's a great card for that list.
And Challenge of Stats is brought to you by Cardsphere, the best way to turn your unplayed cards into played cards. I have a Boros Knights deck in bracket 2 that felt a little bit light on removal, so I went to add a Heliod's Intervention. I didn't have it in my collection, so I added 2 of them to my Cardsphere list, and they were both on their way to me within like 2 hours, and I had them in my mailbox 2 days later.
Whoa.
Like, at this point, 90% of the cards I get for decks come from Cardsphere because it's just like faster and easier than any of the other alternatives out there. Go to cardsphere.com/EDHRECast, check out our favorite way to build up decks. It is absolutely worth it.
That's fantastic. Okay, Dana, getting back to our subject here about color pie breaks, we were just talking about some defensive stuff, some defensive capabilities that red has. I think it only makes sense that we also talk about some surprising defensive capabilities that another color has. Let's talk about some color pie breaks in black, and specifically on that defensive angle. When people cast out darkness in a black deck, a 1 mana fog in black, everyone is always surprised by this 100% of the time. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition with this card, you know? It is a fantastic surprise and not the kind of thing that you expect black to be able to do, because black is usually, it doesn't mind if it loses a whole bunch of life. But in this case, it can really save your bacon, and I think it's a very valuable piece for that reason.
A single black mana fog. It's not even like it was an overcosted fog or anything in black. It's the same cost as fog. That's amazingly powerful. And there's a reason that like the cheapest version of this card is still like $10.
Yeah, right? Yeah, this is an effect that you can like, you see it coming from other colors. And I think the fact that it is so unique in black is what is what makes it catch everyone off guard in that way. Like you sort of expect that like, oh, if they're playing green, then maybe that might have like a fancy fog, or you might expect the either spoutsy type of thing from a blue player, for instance. But you just don't see it coming in black, which allows you as the person playing it to put yourself into positions where you can capitalize on that unexpected surprise when your opponents like see that maybe you've overextended. They're like, all right, cool, now I'll crack in at you. Well, you didn't expect me to have this the way that you might have expected it from other colors. It's just such a great thing that you can position yourself for. Currently showing up in about 45,000 decks right here. And the fact that it's about a $10 card is the reason probably why it's not seeing more play, because I think that is such a valuable effect for this color.
Yeah, it's one of those things, both, but because, you know, it's kind of pricey and it's only had a couple of printings, and people probably never think to even look for it. Like, unless you've seen someone cast a fog, or excuse me, cast a darkness, you probably don't know it's even a card that exists, because why would you? Why would you be like searching for black fog effects if you're trying to find something for your list? That makes no sense at all, but yeah. It is a really powerful card, and especially something like mono black, where, again, similar to talking about defensive stuff in red, where it's very aggressive, black tends to play that way as well. And having that kind of, that trump card that you can slam on the table after you've alpha struck at somebody, buy yourself a turn, and then do it again next turn is so useful in those colors.
Yeah. Do you feel the same way about another color pie bend / break in black, Koskan Falls? This one's a little bit weirder. It's a 4-mana black enchantment. During your upkeep, you have to tap an untapped creature you control, or else you lose the Koskan Falls, but it is basically a Ghostly Prison-esque effect. Creatures can't attack you unless the attacking player pays 2 mana per creature in order to hit you. So a black Ghostly Prison. Do you feel quite as enchanted by this one? No pun intended?
I think I think it's actually a very fun effect. I like that this exists in black too. Again, it's a pretty big break. I tend to not like propaganda-ish effects in general, because it's very easy for me to like be too secure, feeling, oh, I have this out. Right. I can swing and I will be protected, and then someone removes it and your protection's gone. Yes, they can counterspell a darkness or something, but like, so I don't necessarily love these as much. But it's still really good. Like, I've ran it in decks before in the past, for sure. I don't have it in one right now, but yeah, I've ran it to good effect and been happy with it as well. So yeah, I enjoy this.
I think I'm personally a little bit less enthused by it. Like, I have a couple of mono black decks over my Commander play in history, and I've never gone to Koskin Falls the way that I've immediately reached for a darkness per se. And it is just the predictability or the see it coming and can deal with it before they ever get there. So it's not high on my list personally. And it's interesting to compare this to the Glacial Crevices that we had earlier, because that was also an enchantment that sticks around in play that people can see coming. But even then, if someone tries to kill it before they go to attack you, you can still activate the Glacial Crevices and stop the damage before they even move to their combat steps. So there's that instant speed interaction that I think I'm very personally attached to. But when I do see a Koskin Falls and someone's got a deck where that is going to be so super useful, say they're giving a lot of creatures out to their opponents and goading stuff, once you get down to a 1v1 with a remaining player who you've given a whole bunch of creatures to that are goaded, having some nice defenses there, like, it makes total sense how this type of card can show up in a lot of those decks that will need just a little bit of extra help to make sure that that strategy doesn't backfire on them. So it's a very interesting card, but also, again, very strange for black to have access to it at all.
Yeah. Well, so all the cards we've been talking about, Darkness and Koskin Falls especially, are very, very old. We're talking like the first 3-4 years of Magic's history. But we've got a couple color pie breaks recently in the form of Feed the Swarm and Withering Torment. And so at this point, maybe they're not color pie breaks. Maybe they're just a new thing they're doing a little bit in black. But for the moment, they feel like a break because it's unique in black to have the ability to interact with enchantments in particular. And I'm running these if I'm playing mono black or black and blue where I don't have access to other ways to remove those things, or even Rakdos. Those are really, really powerful. I'm running Feed the Swarm in a whole bunch of decks along with Withering Torment.
These are crazy popular too for exactly that reason. Withering Torment is showing up in 8% of decks that can play it. That's over 175,000 decks out there in the database. And Feed the Swarm is showing up in over 17% of decks that are eligible to play it. Showing up in over 500,000 decks. 575,000 decks plus are playing Feed the Swarm. Probably owing quite a lot to the fact that Feed the Swarm has been very regularly reprinted in things like precons that do need perhaps a little bit of access to perhaps some enchantment removal, given their color combination. If it's a Grixis or a Rakdos deck or something like that, it can be very, very nice to have just a little bit of, oh, did someone play a Rest in Peace? No, thank you. I would like to be able to get rid of that so that my graveyard strategy can work again, please. So they are very, very clutch, because otherwise you're kind of stuck with those silver bullet enchantments that your opponents will play, and you might need some way to get rid of them. And black can't even do the liquid metal torque or liquid metal coating trick that red has access to, because while red can turn an enchantment into an artifact and then pretty easily destroy an artifact, black doesn't have very consistent artifact removal necessarily either. So that's not even necessarily an option for it very easily. So it's sort of this, or I play like an all is dust in order to get rid of opponents' enchantments. And now that this is a thing that black spells actually have a bit more regular access to, it's interesting to see how black can adapt to the times as they change.
Well, similarly, in terms of cards that like might not really be a break, but just feel like it, is something like Imp's Mischief. It's an instant speed, 1 in a black. Change the target of target spell with a single target, and you lose life equal to that spell's mana value. So it's runnable in mono black. You can use that, and it's kind of a redirect effect that you can redirect at the cost of some life. In mono black or colors where you don't have access to things that like have the ability to redirect spells, that can be really, really powerful. And it's not even entirely limited just to, stopping someone from removing your stuff. On more than one occasion, I've redirected an aura that someone's gone to put on one of their creatures onto my own creature with Mischief. It's really, really versatile, and it's a very good card.
That is incredible. Yeah, this is definitely an effect that we regularly associate with almost exclusively red, but usually red or blue, to be able to swerve something away. And being able to point someone else's removal spell towards a different creature or steal their aura. Dana, that's diabolical. I absolutely adore it. A very, very interesting card indeed. A nice surprise piece of protection, again, that you might be able to get from this color that is known for being a little bit faster and looser. It does fall into, again, the flavor of like black will pay life in order to pull stuff off. Sure, it really enjoys doing that, but this is, again, one of those things that will catch opponents off guard. And very regularly, one of the things that decides whether or not you're going to win a game of EDH is whether or not you are successfully able to catch your opponents off guard.
Yeah, turning someone's removal spell aimed toward your scariest creature into a removal spell aimed towards their scariest creature.
Yeah.
can be a really, really huge swing, like a game-changingly huge swing at times. Very, very powerful effect, and having one card in black that does that, very, very useful.
So one of the things that I think is so interesting about these color pie breaks is that once there is a density of enough of these types of things, it does sort of force you to reframe in your head what you think each color is good at in EDH.
Yeah.
We just talked about black, and black is very regularly associated as being like the death color. Like this is the one that's really good at killing off enemy creatures and stuff. But when we look at the color blue, when we look at some of the things that blue has gotten access to that feel like they're bending a bit in what the color is normally able to do, I feel like blue is probably the best color at removal, maybe sometimes. Like rapid hybridization, Pongify, reality shift, cyber conversion. Blue has really efficient forms of removal against enemy creatures. Blue is supposed to usually just bounce them, but instead it's turning them into like ape tokens and stuff like that. And those cards are nutty good and really force me to reconsider what blue do.
I mean, okay, white has, particularly for single target creature removal, white obviously has Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile. But Swords to Plowshares was printed in alpha. Path to Exile at this point is 15, I think, or so years old. And we've never gotten anything at a single mana in white for removing creatures nearly that good since then. Rapid Hybridization, Pongify, Reality Shift. Cyber Conversion's only a couple years old. They're still doing this in blue. They're still giving us really efficient creature removal options. You'll never probably surpass those big two in white. But man, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 slots feel like they're filled with blue cards at this point. And not any black spells. There's nothing, I feel like single target creature removal in black, blue's definitely better than black, and white only might have the lead because of 2 cards.
Yeah, I've played against folks who are playing blue, and they're like, I don't think I can deal with creatures. And I'm just like, what are you talking about?
What?
Like, I have an Azorius deck that I've just built, and my single target creature removal in the deck is so efficient that I'm like, I can't devote this many slots to removing creatures. But I have a wealth of options here. And these cards are, again, crazy popular. Pongify is showing up in 11% of decks eligible to play it. That is 373,000 total decks out there and growing. Rapid Hybridization is also showing up in over 300,000 decks. That's 9% of decks that can play it. Reality Shift, about 278,000. That's 8% of decks that can play it. This is a huge amount of deck representation out there for these spells because that's just how efficient that they are. And again, does force me to reconsider what my traditional expectations are of blue.
Right.
Blue is, in fact, extraordinarily reactive to the stuff that did already make it into play, which is counter to my usual expectation about the way that blue is traditionally able to handle things. So I feel very afraid for my creatures when I'm facing off against a blue deck because of this whole suite of spells that continues to expand over time.
Well, and as with Feed the Swarm and Withering Torment, at some point it ceases to be a color pie break and kind of becomes a thing that blue is just doing. And that seems to be the case. So like Rapid Hybridization, Pongify may have felt like color pie breaks. At this point, this is just a thing they're kind of doing. And the genesis of it is like, blue could transform creatures. They just couldn't ever transform them nearly this well until, we first got Pongify, and they've just been doing it since then. It's just a really, really strong thing you can do in blue that is not something people think about and associate with the color blue.
Yeah. And that's just it. When you do push the envelope that many times over the years, it does just create a new boundary for what the color pie actually looks like. And then suddenly these colors have bled into other areas that maybe they weren't supposed to, but now they do. And now that is a thing that just sort of is considered to be established and there, and will therefore be a thing that design continues to explore even further in. And like I go back and forth sometimes on how I feel about some of those pushes. Like I think that these spells in blue are flavorful and very efficient. I'm not sure I want too many more of them necessarily, though.
Absolutely.
And I don't like that green is really good at doing stuff with artifacts and it has a whole bunch of flying creatures now either. Like there are some of those boundaries that feel a little uncomfortable to me, even though clearly the game has had to shift around them based off of a lot of designs that continue off of a lot of these inspirations. So it puts me as a player or as a consumer, I like have to just reconsider the game every so often. I'm just like, oh yeah, that is an interesting experiment to go through in your head, when things are moving the way that they are.
Yeah, the laws of gravity, as you thought you understood them, sometimes need to be reevaluated.
That's a brilliant way to put that. I really enjoy that. That's, I think, one of the strongest examples for blue. But to move now on to the color white. White is actually, I think, one of the hardest colors to pin down when it comes to color pie breaks or bends. There are a smattering of things that we know for sure white doesn't usually do. You know, it doesn't usually pay its own life or do mass discard or a whole lot of spellslinger stuff, for instance. There are some of those like, oh yeah, we know that those rules kind of exist for white. But in general, white is one of the most jack of all tradesy types of colors out there. It does have a couple of limitations on itself, but generally, white can do just about anything. So when it comes to color pie breaks, I feel like there aren't that many of them in this color compared to the rest of the color pie.
Yeah, we struggled to come up with things for white, particularly things that were very like powerful and ubiquitous in the format, the way we found them for every other color, just because, like you said, white does tend to do all of these things. It just tends to not do them as well as every other color. It's kind of the well-rounded layman of Magic colors where it can, do any job, but maybe not excel at any one specific job. And because of that, we had a tough time finding any really outstanding color pie breaks for the most part. There's a few ones we will touch on here, though. And maybe the first is some counter spells, although they're not really a color pie break because that is in white's share the pie. But again, like with black, share the pie means there's like 5 spells in the history of Magic ever printed to counter things in white.
Yeah. Most crucially, Lapse of Certainty is one of our biggest favorites, which just like temporarily stalls a spell, but it can come in really clutch, especially if you're playing any of those like Sunforger-esque type of decks out there. Mana Tithe is another really funny one. 1 mana counter spell, unless its controller pays 1. That can really get you sometimes. That extra 1 mana sometimes messes people up.
I think the biggest outburst I ever heard from 5 tables away in an LGS was somebody mana tithing a Soul Ring. Like the first player dropped a Plains past and then mana tithed a Soul Ring on the next turn. And I think that was the loudest I've ever heard like a table. And then the whole room was like, once they explained it, everyone like just cracks up laughing and applauding.
Yeah, I'm on Team Mana Tithe there, and I have to assume that the person who was playing the Soul Ring was also a little bit on Team Mana Tithe.
All you can do is shrug and be like, yep, nope, you got me.
Yep, I deserve it. That's fantastic.
Yep.
We also saw white move into the card Reprieve, which is sort of a color-bended version of the card Remand. And that's a relatively new one as well. Again, sort of stalling a spell out. And those can all come in clutch if you need to buy yourself an extra turn. Or you need to, especially, like, white has so many ways to counter like a board wipe by giving its own stuff hexproof or indestructible or things like that. So I feel like these are most commonly used to stop someone else from really popping off, maybe in the Spellslinger dimension.
Right.
Which is a nice thing to see that white can occasionally do, but it is pretty rare. But even then, this is still technically a piece of the color for white. So it's more of a bend than it necessarily feels like a break.
And white has a couple of oddball theft effects too, which is not a thing you see in white.
Sure.
Debt of Honor actually just spiked in price recently because it's been seeing a little bit of play. That's one where if a creature dies and you've hit it with Debt of Honor as an instant, you gain control of it. There's a really old creature from back in, I think, the Dark called Preacher, where you can gain control of a creature. And I think the time shifted version of that is a spell called Evangelize. So there's a couple of things over the years that let you take control of your opponent's stuff with white. But again, like we're talking 3 or 4 spells and they don't see very much play at all.
That's really the thing. Another like that it could potentially gesture at that could be potentially one of the most popular quote bends or breaks for white would be like Suture Priest, for instance, because white does not usually dabble in direct life loss for your opponents, and Suture Priest does make your opponents lose life when they get creatures. But even then, the decks that are playing Suture Priest are not always playing it for that life loss ability so much as the life gain ability, because they're playing a life gain deck. It is definitely clutch in certain like combo decks like a Feldegriff or something, for instance. So that is where I think you maybe feel it the most forcefully. But most of these bends or breaks are not making quite as big a splash as we saw in green or in black or things like that. These are very kind of sticking to the shallows is a lot more the way that it feels.
Yeah.
If I were to like keep on trying to find more here, and this is kind of a decently big stretch here, but 2 others that come to my mind would be like Sacrifice Outlets that are white. We're really big fans of the cards Martyr's Cause and Fanatical Devotion. Like Fanatical Devotion can sacrifice a creature to regenerate another one of your creatures. White does have creatures that do self-sacrifice a lot, but it's not often that you see white wantonly sacrificing a whole bunch of its creatures. That feels a lot more like the kind of thing that you'd see in black's piece of the color pie. So those maybe feel a little bit like they're kind of a color bend, but even then, not a particularly huge one because there are so many colorless sacrifice outlets that exist anyway.
Right.
So big stretch here. I should warm up before I do a stretch this big. That's I'm kind of far reaching to even call that a color pie bend. I think the biggest lesson for white, though, when it really comes down to it, the biggest lesson for white is probably that thing that we've already been hinting at the whole time. Because the thing that used to be out of the color pie for white was significant or meaningful card advantage. And that is just the norm now. That is a thing that they really did away with because they kind of needed to, more or less, in order for those decks to really stand the proper chance that they should stand as the game continues to evolve. So that is, I think, the biggest example of the color pie completely shifting or breaking because of the things that needed to evolve with those colors, is that white draws cards now and it does a decent job of it. So really the biggest color pie bend is just a reshaping of where that fence line ever existed in the first place.
Yeah, like in the past, Mentor of the Meek showed up in all kinds of decks just because it was one of the few kind of draw engines you can get in white. And, there's a half dozen enchantments, Trouble in Pairs being the most popular and most powerful, but there's a lot of different ways in white now that you can draw cards, either as a repeatable engine on an enchantment or something, or like as a one-off effect. I'm drawing 3 cards, everyone else is drawing 1 kind of thing. There's a couple of different variants on that as well that are kind of white flavored versions of a draw effect. They found a way to give white draw by keeping it in character too, versus, just a white Rhystic Study or something. The last little weird thing I'm going to talk about briefly, because like colorless has access to a lot of effects, but to this day, the one that really stands out to me as something that feels like a break is Not of This World, which is a colorless counterspell.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And I'm a huge fan of this card just in general. I feel like, number one, I play a lot of Voltron decks or kind of big creature decks. The ability to cast a counterspell for 0 mana to counter something targeting your giant creature is really, really powerful. And I think people miss out on how good this is and what a break it feels like by giving you access to this in colors that don't have this kind of effect.
I've seen you use this to ruinous effect in games, and it seems like it's mostly, like, when I look at the data for this card, it is mostly kind of reserved to showing up in a lot of the like dedicated colorless decks out there, which are, I suppose, the most likely to have big creatures in them that Not of This World would then be able to protect. But I mean, even if you put this into other decks that just happen to have a big creature commander, like, I don't know, a dragon deck here or there, or what is the Yargle and Multani or things like that. Yeah. Or I believe you've challenged the stats on this one in Gishath decks in the past, which would also be like, hey, yeah, no, you're not messing with me. Even if I had to tap out to play my super expensive commander, you are not messing with my thing, which can really be the difference between whether or not that commander is able to connect and deal the damage that it needs to do and then get your game plan properly underway. This card is super clutch. And again, one of those things that people will not see coming because it does feel so strange to show up in a colorless deck or a red deck or whatever. Yeah, this is a fantastic card.
I even run it in a deck with access to blue. It's in my Kedis and Crom deck because the way the deck works, I throw a bunch of buffs on Crom when he's swinging in and buff his power up. Well, that makes people want to remove him, but it also puts me in a position where like I have to choose between buffing him up or saving counterspell mana. And having one additional counterspell that I can cast for free on top of the couple other options in blue, it's worth it. Even in color with access to all of blue's counterspell, Not of This World is worth running it in that situation. So that's how versatile and useful it is.
I totally see it. That's, I mean, because like, yes, it does only stop pinpoint removal most of the time because it has to counter a spell that is targeting your big creature. But I mean, I play Deflecting Swat on things that people are trying to use to just get rid of my big creature. But it's hard to beat free. That is the perfect price. That can be super, super clutch. And even just the ability to have tapped out and still trick your opponents in that way. Yeah, clutch card. And I would say that it needs to show up in more than the under 50,000 decks that it's currently showing up in. So challenge the stats just littered all over this episode, really. There's a lot of gems in here, folks.
Right. This is challenge the stats, the episode. Yeah.
A little bit, yeah. But it's also interesting to take a look at the stats of the ones that are so popular, because when those breaks are true breaks, of course it's going to be desirable. We finally get to try out something something taboo that we weren't supposed to have. So you also get a little bit of a glee from when it is that you do play these. A very important part of the game and an important part to understand in order to improve your game.
Yeah.
That way, even if it's just for you to play off of what people won't expect from you, a lot of these cards, understanding all of the nuances of them are, I think, really important level up moments for players.
Very much agree. The ability to do things that you don't have access to. Super, super powerful in Commander especially.
Reaching into those other toolboxes can really throw folks for a loop.
Yeah.
Listeners, we've got to hear from you about what your favorite color pie bends and breaks are out there. Are there any that we did not get to? Are there some that we did name that you think actually feel a little bit more justified in those colors? Let us know your thoughts. But with that, we're going to call this episode to a close. So, Dana, if our listeners want to get in touch with us, where is it that they can find you online, man?
You can find me online at Dana Roach. I'm writing articles for EDHREC, and you can find all of us together at patreon.com/EDHRECast.
And you can find me everywhere online, from Instagram to Blue Sky, at Joseph M. Schultz. And you can find the cast online at EDHRECast. And heads up, viewers and listeners, everyone out there, coming soon, we're probably going to end up changing the day that our show goes out from Friday to perhaps Monday. So keep your eyes out for that too. Listeners, we'll be back at you next week with more data and insights. But until then, remember, EDHREC your deck before you wreck your deck.